Hey, all you Ethicuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, what the heck's wrong with you? It's free. Welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think changing our workplace can change our world, I know I say this often, but boy, do I have a treat for you. Two of my all-time faves today, the Dr. Hemma Lomax and the one and only Christian Hunt. So we're going to be talking about AI. We're going to be talking about behavioral science. And we're going to talk about integrating tech, behavior, and ethics. So let's see a nice emoji exploji to get started here. Let's break some records. I really have high hopes for today's episode. As we do our little announcements here, like we like to say every single week, your network is your net worth. Neither are big enough. So why don't you do something to expand the one, to expand the other? Drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat and connect with at least one person today. Invite your friends, invite your colleagues in other companies, invite your teammates to the Ethicsverse. Unless you want to be the smartest person in the room, in which case, don't tell anybody about it. Drop that LinkedIn URL in the chat and take advantage of this highly collegial asset that we have, which is this network, which is this community that we're all a part of. So if it's your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning Ethicutie, glad to see you again. We're going to dive through a couple of things here. Now, I got, like I said, I am like starstruck today. We got Hemma and Christian. These are two people I listen to constantly when I'm walking my dog at night. So if you're not following them, click this QR code and check out their podcast. The Unless podcast this week had David Meltzer on it, and he had this really good point about his mom told him, always study human behavior because human behavior never changes. So much of our job is trying to drive human behavior. So it's a really, really great episode. And on the Human Risk's most recent episode, we had Pav Gill, and by we, I mean he, by he, I mean Christian, had Pav Gill on talking about smart whistleblowing that works. So two great episodes there. If you have not checked those out, absolutely do. And if you have not checked out the fastest growing business ethics podcast in the world, the Ethics Experts, we had Dr. Bettina Palazzo on. If you don't know Dr. Bettina, definitely just search her out on LinkedIn and follow her. She puts out a ton of great content, and she has some really great frameworks for the future. So if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and do that. And, of course, when we got an author on, we're giving out books, okay? I don't even like making money around here. I just like giving out books. So we're giving out, of course, The Art of Ideation by Hemma Lomax and Ashley. And we're also giving out Humanizing Rules. This is by Christian Hunt. So these both need to be on your bedside table, dog-eared. So drop those comments in the chat, drop those questions in the chat. Let's keep this super active and get yourself a book. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit about Ethico. If you don't know, Ethico is a next-gen tool for you to help manage risk in a more effective way, to drive more efficiency, and ultimately build a demonstrable program of effectiveness. If you have not checked out our G2, absolutely you should. I want to share a little quote from this week for you. This is from an actual client, okay? This is not AI, I promise. What I love about Ethico is that you're always forward thinking, thank you, in touch with what's actually going on in the industry, and I never have to tell you about problems because you are always so focused on solving the problems for us. That's what being proactive is all about. We need to be a great partner to our clients, and we're gonna put our heart into the job that we do. So if you are feeling like you're wandering in the wilderness and you're sick of a bad vendor, you're sick of an old tool that's super clunky that you can't get the data out of, or you have, don't do this, you've gone on Reddit and searched Thoma Bravo, you're a conversant client and you're scared about what the future holds, then check us out. If you want to know how much it costs, it's 15% less than what you're paying right now. We'll do up to a year free to help with the change management. And what's great is if smart people who care have tools that actually work, that can connect. It's amazing the impact that we can have. So check out Ethico. If you got something coming up in the next year, I think it'll be worth your time. And if not, we might not be the right company for you. That's all good. But we can at least help you find the solution that's going to be best. Last little announcement here. We are starting Ethicsverse Live. Round of applause. Emoji explosies coming. Charlotte Roundtable is starting this month. We're having it on February 26th at a really cool restaurant called 60 Vines, okay? My favorite place in Charlotte. So check that out. And then we're going to have a forum next week, and you can go on the website and you can see all the different cities that we're coming to this year. All right, with that, let's get a big round of applause, a big Ethico welcome for Dr. Hemma Lomax and Christian Hunt. Round of applause. All right, so Hemma is a friend, Christian is a friend. These are two people I've learned so much from. Hemma operates Compass 360. She does a lot of compliance coaching and a lot of fractional compliance work. So if you need some help or you want some ideas or you just need a little coaching, someone to bounce a problem off of, check out Compass 360. That's her website. And also check out Christian Hunt's website, Human Risk. He has a lot of phenomenal thought leadership, as you know. I love his podcast, and anything that he does, I always learn something from. But he has a great consulting business as well that can really help you build the structures within your organization that are going to drive the outcomes that you want. Okay, welcome everybody. How's it going?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about how to harness AI to manage risk, why behavioral sciences are real secret weapons. So get your pencils out because we're going to be sharing some secrets, and where to find the metrics that actually matter. So I want to dive right into our conversation. Like I said, keep those comments coming in the chat. I want to first talk a little bit about AI in compliance. So I'm going to start with you, Hemma. How do you see AI being used for compliance right now?
So many opportunities. I mean, about a year ago, I was using just the newest first version of ChatGPT to make sure my policies were at the right reading level for my employee base. So there's some very simple things you can do. Just put it in. Prompt engineering is becoming a thing, but I just literally said, please rewrite this to a 10th grade reading level, and magic, right? My content, the policies that I've already used were then converted into language. It was just much more palatable. So that's one low-hanging fruit piece. If you're not doing that already, you should be thinking about it. The other thing, I went through a whole exercise of costing out how much it would cost to translate some of my policies. And then I found out that, again, AI doing a first pass on translation could help you. No trusting AI on its own, right? Lots of human in the loop afterwards, some quality assurance afterwards, but it was really helpful there. And then, since then, the latest thing is having a Q&A, like a agentic style Q&A chatbot that is relying on AI to generate answers to questions from your employees. So we've often used the Q&A for FAQ type questions, but now AI can read the policy and answer for you. And so again, there's probably some risk averse people out there that don't want to do that now, but it's there. It's out there. There are some vendors already selling this. And so I would certainly think about using that. And then, I'll pass over to Christian, but I've got some ideas of where I think it's going to, so we'll get there.
Yeah, so I think all great stuff. Obviously, we can use it to analyze data, right? And there's tons of work that we're spotting patterns that we as humans can't patch. So lots of monitoring and surveillance applications. I'm going to focus a little bit on what I think is kind of the fun end of the spectrum. And the fun end of the spectrum, and you're pointing towards it, Hemma, is actually helping us to think more creatively. Because I think one of the brilliant things that ChatGPT can do is to challenge us and to come up with ideas that we wouldn't have thought of. So I think it's an amazing tool for ideation, coming up with ideas, for thinking about things we might not have thought about. I need to do some training. I need an original idea. Come up with something different for me. You can also use it, and this is one of my favorite applications at the moment, is use it to think about loopholes in your rules. So put a rule in there and then say, how would you go about breaking this particular rule? And it will find all sorts of interesting things there. So I think it's everything from like a really cool intern that can give you amazing ideas of technological ways of doing things or different ways of thinking about it. But you've also got an experienced head there that can just help challenge things from a different perspective. So it adds, people think of it as tech, but it actually adds a huge amount of things that we'd ordinarily have to turn to humans for. So that's the bit that I love playing with.
So I agree with that. I think a lot of the value you get out of it is going to be kind of tied to the prompt that you end up using. And so when you're prompting it to say, find loopholes in this rules, or you're prompting it to say, write me this policy or reword this policy, I recommend always adding something in there. Like, you are an ethics and compliance expert, well-versed in behavioral science and, modern compliance techniques. Tell it what you want it to be, tell you what you want it to do, and it's going to feed itself, better resources and better, data points to like spit that answer out. So that's one thing. And, I also think it is such a great brainstorming partner, to your point. Like, whatever your problem is, if you're like, hey, I want to have a new speak up campaign, but I don't have a lot of budget, what are some ways that I can solve for that? And it's going to spit out a bunch of ideas. They're not all going to be good, of course, but it's a way to get things moving and kind of give you some fresh eyes, so to speak, on whatever you might be working on. One other application I like a lot, kind of going back to what Hemma was talking about, is you might have really well-written policies, but maybe they're a little bit too high of a reading level, like she said, or maybe there's a little bit too much legalese. You, of course, can have that rewrite it and kind of quote unquote dumb it down a little bit, although I don't like that term. Because my reading level is a little bit lower. But you also can say, hey, give me a too long didn't read summary, or give me a sales version of this policy, or, I need to make this policy for someone in another, region or in another department. So it can help you iterate versions of a policy very quickly to just present to the, again, this is design thinking, keeping the end user in mind, to present to that end user the information that they actually need. How do you like that? Okay. So this is kind of a problem this is a question that we hear all the time. There's kind of this aversion, a lot of people in our space, they have kind of an aversion to this technology because it feels like a black box and there's so many unknowns. And we've heard these stories about, whatever, like hallucinations, data getting out and stuff like that. How comfortable do you think we should be in adopting these resources and integrating this new technology or this new tool in our day-to-day work? Let's start with you, Hemma.
Yes, thanks. I think we should get comfortable with being a bit uncomfortable, number one, right? Because if you're expecting comfort, you're going to be left behind. I think it's obviously something, we're also in the role, aren't we? We're risk averse. We're trying to manage the risks of what might be coming. So I think we've got a double role there. Is first be experimental, stay in the game, stay in the communications. Second, make sure that we're managing the risk for ourselves and for others, for our functions and our business. It's funny you mentioned David Meltzer, my guest on Unless the podcast, because what I learned about David is he was one of the first people to sell Westlaw. And Westlaw was the legal search function that you would use. It was like the first search engine before the internet was made publicly available. So who knew? The lawyers were at the forefront of that technology. We were the ones using search engine function really early. I'd like to think that we have a really unique opportunity to be in that position again as ethics and compliance professionals. There's lots we're going to be able to see as we manage the risk. And while we're thinking about helping our businesses move forward, we should be mining those opportunities for ideas as well and showing that it can work and showing how we can work in a responsible way with AI. So I think lots of opportunities. We should I hope people embrace this as a really exciting opportunity. What do they call it? The fourth industrial revolution. Well, how cool that we're part of it, right? So take your place in this revolution, do your part, and don't be too afraid, because people will derive their confidence in AI from you as well in terms of your role in the corporation and your organization. So you don't want to be the risk-averse person that was the naysayer. Back to the lawyers again. We didn't want to use email for lawyers, right? For legal communications for a long time. And that doesn't help with our brand either. So think of our brand in terms of the position we play in this revolution and lean in. That's what I'd say.
Remember when people were transitioning from horses to cars? There were people that literally wouldn't get into a car because they thought if a human body traveled faster than 30 miles an hour, which is apparently what a horse can run, if it can travel 30 miles an hour faster, that we would die. Okay, so that obviously seems very silly, and everybody's in a car right now. So there's a little bit of that aversion that I feel kind of in our space right now, because we don't want to die, right? We're used to riding this horse, but I don't think our future is our future is absolutely going to have AI integrated in everything to a degree that we can't even imagine right now. So figuring out ways to start to engage with it. Yeah, figuring out ways to engage with it that don't compromise your principles or open your organization to risk, but kind of dip your toe in the water. I think we need to do, otherwise we're going to get kind of left behind. You were going to say something, and then we'll go to Christian.
Yes, I'm thinking about that first car, right? Like that first car needed seatbelts and safety devices. And if we as compliance professionals just stepped out the way and said, nope, we're on the horse, leave us alone, we wouldn't have helped develop the car to the place where it is today.
Great
point.
And
AI is also metaphorically the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. So come on, let's be the ones that invent the seatbelts, the safety limiters. Let's think about that, because
so good.
We will keep people moving forward. I always say brakes are not there to stop. Brakes are there to help you go faster. We are the brakes. We're the metaphorical brakes. We're going to teach people how to take that curve faster. I'm here at Charlotte Speedway, thinking about a car going around the Speedway. You would not drive a car that didn't have brakes. Brakes are there to help you take that curve, tap on it lightly so you can go faster. And that's what we should be doing when it comes to AI.
Love that. Christian, what's your perspective on this one?
Yeah, I can look at the risk of repeating everything that's been said. I agree with all of that. I mean, I think the way to look at this is, look, it is there. We cannot get the genie back into the bottle. And we're sitting there going, this thing poses huge amounts of risk. Maybe if we ignore it, it'll go away. That is not going to happen. It is there. And I can guarantee, I've been chatting to lots of people who've gone, well, we have banned the use of AI within our organization because that's the safest approach. And I'm like, I get that you have theoretically done that, and maybe you have stopped people using it on their work computers. But smart employees are already using this stuff, right? They will be out there working out quite intelligently. How can they make their lives easier? And so you've got to be thinking they'll be using it. So you might as well understand this. If you really want to understand the risks it poses and to get ahead of it, then you need to be doing that particular, playing in that particular space. And the best way is to play in a kind of non-sensitive way. So the trick for me is to say, don't go putting highly sensitive data through some kind of form of AI system, whether that's Gen AI or anything else, without having done the proper checks for it. But that doesn't mean you can't play with AI. There's tons of things you can do that will allow you to see how it works, what it can do, what it can't do, what the risks are, what the opportunities of it are. And that is what the smart people within your organization are going to be doing for their own role. So if you want to start thinking, how do we evolve a framework that means that we can get the best out of AI, recognizing it's not going away, the answer is you've got to understand it. The only way you are going to understand it is to play with it and to just test out what it can do and play with it in your own space in a safe way. I think is a really smart way to learn, because otherwise, this thing is running pretty fast already. It's going to run even faster. The learning curve is only going to get steeper. So I would be saying, if you're not on it already, get playing with it already, see what it can do, play in a safe way, and you'll learn some interesting. And to be honest, it's a ton of fun as well.
It is. Yeah, it is a ton of fun. And I don't know, I just feel like it helps get the creative juices flowing in so many ways. You have kind of a semblance of an idea. It really can give you some good angles. And to your point, like, you're not going to learn how to swim by like reading books about swimming. You have to like jump in the pool and like feel how the water is, right? Like the same thing with AI. You got to jump in and start using it. And you said something interesting before. I think a lot of us we don't want to rely on it. I don't want to turn in a paper that AI wrote and be like, I wrote it. Of course not. But if you think about it like an intern, or you think about it like a teammate, it can generate something that you then can do your refinement to, and you can kind of clean it up and make sure that there are none of those hallucinations in there, and make sure that there's no representations that you yourself wouldn't have actually put on the page. But again, it can help you generate more content in more sort of thoughtful ways faster, And
I think what's super interesting about it, Nick, is if you play and it doesn't do what you want it to do. Right. Firstly, as you rightly pointed out, particularly Gen AI, right, the prompt is really important. So learning how to prompt effectively and recognizing that even if you put the same prompt in twice, you can get a different answer out each time, right? Because it's freshly generating content. And so recognizing what it can and can't do. So to a certain extent, even if it doesn't do exactly what you want, that is not a wasted time. Have a look and think about, why has it produced that particular result, and what can I learn from that piece? And so I think it's a case really of approaching it intelligently, of saying, look, it's a moving target. It's shifting what it can do. But every single time you go at it, it's doing something slightly different, right? So even if you put the same search in twice, same prompt in twice,
exactly,
you're not guaranteed to get the same result. And playing with it, and I've spent a lot of time trying to break it. So I'll give you one really silly example, right? So I like to use it to generate images for my presentation. So I use Legos. People who follow me on social media will know I love using kind of Lego style imagery. So I use that on socials, but I also use it during presentations, because I think Lego is a very powerful way of making it. So I got it to generate images, and believe it or not, ChatGPT has its own compliance officer, right? There are certain things it has been told it is not allowed to do. And one classic example is I wanted an image to illustrate money laundering. Right, classic problem in financial services. So we know what the classic money laundering image is, right? Which is some sort of laundrette thing with people sticking money inside a washing machine. It wouldn't generate that. And I just kind of went, okay, I'm going to try and beat ChatGPT's rules. So I basically iterated until I got the image I wanted by working out how to break ChatGPT's rules. And that became this kind of challenge for me, because I'm like, I'm going to get around the system. Now, what's interesting about that is exactly the mindset that people who want to break rules go through. Right. So whether that's internally people trying to get around your rules, or external people. So I was learning how ChatGPT worked, but I was also putting myself in the mindset of the people who might want to break the rules. And that teaches you a whole load of useful stuff as well. So it's not just about learning, you're not learning how to code this thing, how to use the tech. It actually can help you open up, to your point, creative ways of thinking about your job as well.
I love that. We were at dinner last night, me and Hemma, and she made this point that I've been thinking about, since. And she was like, at the end of the day, I'm going to botch this a little bit, Hemma, but you were making the point that, like, at the end of the day, it's all about creative comms, right? Like, or strategic communications. And so much, it's like, we know the regulation, we know the black and white of what's in play and what's not in play. Now we need to be this sort of translator and get this message out to folks, get into their hearts and minds, and change those behaviors. And that is all what communications is. And CJ Shank, thank you for this comment. This is phenomenal, CJ. CJ said, it's extremely helpful for targeting communications to your audience. You can make one message and then make multiple versions of it written at different grade levels or different angles with varying levels of formality. So again, you might not have a comms person on your team. You might not have a data scientist on your team, or a graphic designer. To your point, Christian, you have tools now. This has all been democratized. So you have tools now that bring a lot more capabilities within your reach. So you can use this to, you can have an AI, comms person to say, hey, I need some ideas on how to, make this message more resonant. And I need different versions of this message for these different constituencies that I'm trying to influence. That's a really good one.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to pick up. Sorry, Nick. One of the things that Christian's highlighted is that we worry that we won't be teaching people how to do these things. Well, Christian said AI is teaching us, right? We can use it as our trainer. We are now the apprentice, the things that we weren't traditionally doing, whether it's comms or graphic design. So I think there's a lot to be said for the role of AI. And just one other thing I wanted to highlight, because it's been brought up. I think Beatrice made a point about a person will not give you the right answer every single time. I was at a legal tech conference where the lawyers were like, "Oh, it's only 80% accurate. That's unacceptable. We can't have that in law." My associates were 80% accurate all the time. I'd be thrilled, right? Just got to think about that a little bit. Like, we're very demanding of AI and the accuracy we require, but we're not as demanding of each other, ourselves, and our humans and our apprentices. So, just a thought there. I like that Beatrice flagged that. A person will not always give you the right answer every time either. So be patient with ChatGPT.
And I want to go back to one thing that Christian said, because it was really smart. Are you getting sick of hearing how smart you are, both of you? Yeah? All right. We got some time still. We still got another 40 minutes. But you said, the smart people in the company are using it. And we were in a meeting, a team huddle, and our chief information officer, this is right when DeepSeek came out, and he was like, we can't have DeepSeek on our computers. There's still a lot of questions about it. We're putting a block on it, blah, blah, blah. And then someone raised their hand and they were like, well, what about my phone? I can use it on my phone, right? So to your point, people are going to use it regardless of what the rule is. And we need to think, this AI sort of question, or this AI, tool, like this is like a microcosm, to your point, of how people find ways around things that they think are not valid rules, right? So I just love that. I love that analogy. We were talking a little bit about.
If you want a really simple comparator for that, Nick, because people might go, yeah, but that's not going to happen. It's unrealistic. Think about this, right? Lots of organizations ban YouTube. And the arguments for banning YouTube typically revolve around, number one, bandwidth, right? We don't want people streaming videos all day. That is pertinent up to a point, but most organizations can handle that bandwidth because people are using video quite a lot in their work.
Right.
The second argument is then, well, employees might spend their whole day watching cat videos or worse, right? And I'll leave it to your imaginations to all. And I kind of go, that's not a YouTube problem. That's a supervision problem, right? And what's the harm in someone watching cat videos for a few minutes if that gives them a sense of energy or release, whatever it is, right? What's the harm in that? So that becomes a supervision issue. And if you shut YouTube off, what you're doing is shutting off all the amazing content that's there that could be highly useful and relevant, that people could train themselves on, that's relevant to work. And if you do that, people can still do it on their mobile devices. So if you want, that is a really good analogy for what I think is happening already. So smart employees will be told, you may not do this on your work computers, but they can just do it on their personal devices. And I think, to your point, this is a really, really important thing. We have to, it's my big mantra, we have to recognize not what we would like people to do, but what they are likely to do. Right? Recognize the realities of what, and if we know that there's a great tool out there that could make people's lives easier, particularly if they're under pressure to deliver, they don't really know what they're doing. It's a quick, so people are going to be drawn to this thing, right? Because it's super, super attractive. And why wouldn't you? If you're a smart person, of course you're going to go. So we're better off thinking about how do we facilitate them using it in a safe way than trying to pretend the thing doesn't exist, because people are getting, they will find ways to make it work. So help them to use it effectively and safely. And then the other thing too is you won't be standing behind a rule that is unrealistic. And we all know whenever we come across bureaucracies that have rules that are unrealistic, we laugh about that and we find ways around that problem. You do not want to be owning a policy that is unrealistic.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of to that point, like there's a way for us. So I have a question here that I'm going to answer. Just kidding. So, this kind of deploy AI or fall behind decision, how do you think compliance officers can advocate for it now? And do you think there's too much risk aversion around this? Or do you feel like we're not taking advantage of this opportunity to demonstrate our new brand around this topic? Let's go to you, Hemma.
Yeah, I mean, look, Christian's just highlighted that. And I think I've mentioned this as well. It's like, if you can't even be trusted as a compliance officer to understand what Christian just said, right? Which is, you're setting us up to fail on day one, right? Then you are going to be left behind, because people are going to be deploying it in many, many ways, and you're going to lose all the trust. And actually, we become irrelevant. It's not the other way around. We don't get to put the stops or the brakes on AI. What happens is we put the brakes on ourselves. And Kristen, I know you made that point in relation to AI policies, but of course your point stands for all policies, was what you said. Don't set up any policies where you're making it impossible or unlikely for people to succeed. So help people get where they want to go. Think of forward motion. Keep your people moving forward responsibly as opposed to stopping them altogether. I think that's really helpful, because if you don't, you are in much worse than you think. Not just that, I'm afraid that I haven't done enough on AI, but you are literally making yourself redundant and irrelevant. So I think that's really important. And then to deploy AI, again, back to Kristen's point, it's being deployed. I mean,
right.
I empathize fully with the companies that said, the Samsung had that public nightmare, right, where somebody put the proprietary information in and it went out. And of course, some of our peers were like, well, let's just shut it down till we understand it. I get that. But very quickly, that policy was out of date. I mean, LinkedIn now, Facebook, everything you use has AI. So the very tools that we're being told to use have AI features and benefits that are baked into the product, no extra cost, they're just right there. And so we're obviously using AI. So responsible uses is different to no using, right? Like, and you make the point about the YouTube, the same thing happened with ephemeral messaging. Let's just ban any communications tools that we haven't expressly monitored, right? Well, sounds like it makes sense, but hold on, what are we doing there? We're telling salespeople to not speak to their customers on any channels the customers want.
Right.
And what's the salesperson going to do? Like, that might be what the compliance professional's telling them, but the sales team's definitely not telling them that. They're like, take the call, make the call. So I think, when we say get left behind or deploy, I think it's actually nothing new. It's not about AI. It's about really getting to know your business, having this compliance as a service mentality. Right? You're not just an ephemeral compliance person. You are serving your particular business with where they need to go. And their goals and their objectives are not divorced from what you do. So you must tailor your program to where they want to go, help them get there faster and easier with ease and peace of mind. And
well, I think there's a really cool way to manage this, right? Which is go and have if you've banned something, it is really hard to go and have a conversation with people to say, we've banned this, but we'd like to talk to you about how you might use it, right? Because you look ridiculous. Whereas if you say, we want to make sure that you can use this tool as safely as possible, what are the use? Where might you want to use this? And let's have a look at how we can help you to do that. You can't have that conversation about it if you've already banned it, because you're basically admitting in having the conversation that maybe banning it wasn't such a good idea. So if you allow yourself that room of saying, we want to recognize what you're up to, like, and I think it's also about sharing the risks with people. If I looked at AI very, very simply, okay, the biggest risk that is out there is that it is put in charge of processes it shouldn't be put in charge of, right? Because we don't know what it might do with it. So you don't want it having the nuclear code equivalent in your organization, making and we can think about diversity challenges. We can think there's a whole range of topics where we would say it's potentially, we don't want it in charge of that particular activity. The second thing is proprietary data. So we need to keep all proprietary data off that. If we give people simple guardrails that looked at those things and said, don't put it in charge of any significant processes without any approval, and do not put data, those are very clear. People can work with that and they can understand those particular things. That is way better than us saying, do not use it, because those two, and there are probably other risk categories as well, those two risk categories are so significant, we're going to ban the whole thing to stop those things from happening. That's unrealistic. Much better to work with people and say, here are the absolute red lines. Under no circumstances do this, but you can do that. And by the way, give us feedback anytime you butt up against this is a problem for you. Come and talk to us about it, and you will learn from. And people are willing to engage. I think people like to fight rules that they find painful and bureaucratic is quite fun. But actually, if we remove that and we just go, look, we're up for discussion. Let's work this out together. And by the way, we're also using it, and you can look forward. You can basically look forward thinking, even if you're not necessarily, by saying this is how we're using it in the compliance space. This is how we're using it safely. And therefore, you sit at the vanguard of that thing rather than being the kind of, the sort of drag on progress.
Exactly. I mean, I promise that was an organic comment from Christian. This was not planned. That was exactly what I'm trying to say. Like, if we come to someone, our boss, and we say, hey, I'm really worried about this AI. This is a huge risk. We need to outlaw it. And the boss is like, I just did all my work on AI. This person is an idiot. We're reinforcing this brand that's defined us for the last 2 decades. And so, like, if we're truly at this inflection point and we're truly stepping into a new era of ethics and compliance where the foundation has been laid and now we're erecting a structure that can truly drive the effective impact that, like, we're trying to drive, we obviously have to do things differently. So collaborating in it and viewing ourselves not as brakes to stop the car from moving, but rather brakes to help that car move faster, that is a massive paradigm shift that can allow us to engage with the business in a different way, to not inadvertently reinforce this, like, stereotype that compliance doesn't get it. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
So how about this? As we're stepping into this new era, like, do you feel like, what do you think the new skills are? Because obviously we're not saying throw out those old tools. We're just going to use these new tools, throw out those old frameworks and approaches. We need to add more stuff to the toolbox. So like, what do you think those new skill sets are? Why don't we start with you, Hemma?
I mean, I'm going to say prompt engineering because like it's the thing I'm still learning it myself. I suspect we all are. No one's arrived. And so that's one thing. I almost can't go away from what you just said, though, is that new paradigm, if you're not there, if you're not thinking that is a new skill set, right? That service mentality and, learning that you're there to serve the business and help them keep moving forward in their car is very different to just passing down the messages from a government regulator on high. So go back to the ephemeral messaging, I'll give you that example. Oh, the government's talking about how we need to monitor our communications. That's me just telling you what the government's saying. Right? Doing a bit of a risk assessment as to whether it's even relevant to us and whether it's practical, or is it even actually the law? Just because they're saying it doesn't mean it's the law for all companies. Happens to be a rule that is applying to financial institutions in the US, but it doesn't apply to every public company, right? What they're saying is we're afraid in an investigation that we won't be able to investigate properly because some of your employees, your rogue employees, might have put a bribe, for example, in a secret text that disappeared. Now, if I try to tell you as a business that that's why I'm telling you can't use WhatsApp, you're going to laugh at me. That
100%.
Makes no sense whatsoever. Hold on. You're banning the whole sales force from using WhatsApp for the fear that one of us one day might have a message that you didn't see. Have you seen my email? Right.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, right? So I think that's a skill, it seems very simple and basic, but we need a sea change in who we are when it comes to the compliance profession and who we're trying to help. We are there in service of the business. We don't work for the government, but we are interpreting the things that are relevant to our business. And I know we've talked about this offline as well. That kind of parental sibling kind of role that we can inadvertently take on, the kind of police role, we need to rethink that. Like, how are we going to collaborate and crowdsource these things and co-create the rules and the ways that we implement them?
So I'm a famous driving TikToker. That's not why I got in my accident. But after I totaled my car, I got a new car, and it now has this feature where if I come close to the edge of a lane, it will alert me and get me back on track. Do you think I'm annoyed by that? No, I can watch more videos while I'm driving. I'm kidding. But that is a safety mechanism that allows me to drive faster and, kick more ass, seek more pleasure, whatever, right? That is an enhancement to my life. That is a better picture of what compliance should be in this new era, I think. Christian, over to you. What do you think some of these skills that we really need to build as sort of foundational elements for our, engagement with the business and engagement with our program in this new era?
So I'm going to use the word science to start with, and then I'm going to move into something that's a little bit sort of less serious. And I'll start with science. And by science, I'm thinking about behavioral science. I'm thinking about data science. I'm thinking about these sort of 21st century skills, right, that I think are absolutely key that we have. I think there's a second skill set that we need to bring, which is more of the kind of creativity, curiosity, some of those sort of human attributes, and we need a mixture of those particular things. So we need to be recognizing where are the technical skills. And I don't mean technical skills in the sense of what the rules say. That's a given, right? We need to understand what the rules say. We need to be thinking about some of these 21st century dynamics, right? So do we understand what the people within our organization are doing and how they're doing it? Do we understand the technology that is being deployed, how technology might help us, the risks it poses, all that kind of stuff? The second flip side of it is that creative, curious thing, because I think as we look at the challenges of what we're trying to do within organizations, we are trying to do more with less. So we need to find smart ways of delivering the objectives that we have, right? The rule books are getting fatter. There are more pressures, with cost pressures on us. So how can we think more creatively about what we do, what we don't do, how we go about doing it? Thinking, clever ways of solving problems. And so we need to develop those very, very human attributes, as well as thinking about some of the more technical things that we need to look at. It is a given, as I say, that we understand what the rules are there for, what they're trying to prevent, the spirit and the letter of those, and how we implement that. But I think some of those other skill sets, and we were talking before we started recording, is I'm not sure that people coming into compliance, we weren't taken aside and told that these things were important. We're going to have to work that. I think future generations are going to get that. Right, they will be given these calls, but unfortunately, we're all at the stage where we have to work this stuff out. And so I always joke, Nick, and say, compliance is the world's worst piece of branding, right? If you were trying to make something sound awful and bureaucratic, you use a word like compliance, and then you'd add the suffix officer just to make it sound more bureaucratic. So we've all come from something else into this space, because no kid grows up wanting to be a compliance officer. So we've come for this something else, and at no point were we taken aside. I think it's a little bit like adulting. We were never taken aside and given the training that we actually need to be able to do it. And so my view is we need to sit there and say, okay, what skill set do we need, and what do our people need? Well, I think we're going to be looking at things that we've never really focused on as being particularly important before. And that's where I think, the data, all the stuff we've been talking about now, the technology, what it can do, getting on top of that. But I also think if we want to be effective, we're going to have to be really smart at a whole load of things. And I think that is not a case of just doing what we have always done. We need to think about clever, smart ways of getting forward and meeting the challenges of the 21st century. So that's why I say creativity is a really good example for me. It's creative compliance sounds like an awful thing. I think it's super important. That shouldn't be in the realms of the miscreants doing that. That should be compliance officers should be thinking creatively about how they can deliver their objective.
I met Hemma's friend last night. Her name is Andrea Goulet, and she's brilliant person. And she was talking about a core of empathy is compassion. And she defined compassion as a desire to improve the state of something. And that was like a really interesting reframe of that word. And I think a lot of us have a lot of natural compassion, but a lot of us tend to not look at our operation in terms of what Hemma was saying as a servant to the business, or we don't tend to look at ourselves as business people. And I think, my answer to my question is, in this next chapter, I think we need to activate the things that we're naturally wired with, our natural curiosity, our natural empathy, our natural desire to leave the world better. We need to activate those things and turn those up to 10. And I think we need to develop a lens, like a business person's lens, to look at all the stuff that we're doing. Compliance is a process. An investigation is it's just a business process. And if you're trying to optimize a business process and you're in that continuous improvement mode, you're kind of continuously running through the cycle of your plan, do, check, act. Plan, do, check, act. Plan, do, check, act. You're planning an improvement. You're going to do a little sample of that improvement to see if it, scientifically solves your hypothesis or satisfies your hypothesis. Hey, if I pull this lever, this bucket of water should go up, right? Do, check, make sure it did that. And then you act and you roll that out. And that iterative process is how every single department in your organization is run, to the extent that it's in a continuous improvement mode. The other thing is, I'm going to steal this from Christine Cunningham. Hey, Christine. Christine said, what is likely will help you plan better. And what she's talking about there is another kind of quality I think we need to have in, a high level, which is expected value thinking. So just the risk of something happening the risk of something happening obviously doesn't always mean, it's not a binary thing. It's not like, okay, well then we can't do that. When we can overlay the likelihood of something happening, which we do in our risk assessments, of course, but if we can have that as a lens that we're gauging everything on, I think it'll help us really focus on the materiality and focus our efforts on the things that matter most. All right, I'd love to jump into. Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, no, sorry, just wanted to piggyback on that. I wanted to put a bit more meat on the kind of compliance as a service piece of it, because one thing I was thinking about recently is the reframing of our position. And we've talked about that a little bit. It's like we can inadvertently position ourselves as the hero when it comes to compliance, and the villain, the insider threat, being the employee. Now, we're all human. Just think about that for a minute. If you are being approached as the potential threat, the insider threat, the potential villain in the story, it's not good. It's not empowering. You're not going to have any agency. You're going to have to just wait to be told what to do. But if we position ourselves in a different way, where the hero is the employee trying to get the job done, right? The villain might be a difficult law or a risk that's outside your control. And we are just the guide, right? We are guiding you to your destination,
yes,
which is responsible profit, responsible business. Right? We see your destination. We know how it feels. You want to feel appreciated and, encouraged and supported in that place. So as a guide, I take you to that destination. You are no longer the villain. I'm no longer the hero. I'm just guiding you towards your destination responsibly. I think that framing is very different, and it's a skill we need to think about. It's easy to come in as the police and think we're the good guys and you're the potential bad guys, but we also know how badly that will land. And we talk about compliance sucks. That's pretty bad. I wouldn't want to speak to my compliance officer either. But if we can reframe it, I think we could achieve something there. So go on, Nick. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. You are absolutely right. I am absolutely the main character in my life, but I'm not the main character in your life. And I think if I show up as Luke Skywalker to you, then you're like, I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm the main guy. We need to show up to those folks as the Obi-Wan Kenobi, that sage, that Sherpa, that guide, and not make it all about ourselves. So I love that.
So Nick, I'm gonna praise you, and then I'm gonna challenge you, and I'm gonna praise you by saying I've previously referred to you as the Ryan Seacrest of compliance, and I stand by that, because I think if we take the American Idol thing, right, this is what you bring together people that have interesting perspectives, right? You host the show, right? Yeah. But actually, you're shining a light on other people. So if we take American Idol as the classic example, right? Yes, he creates the show, he makes but it's the singers that are providing the thing, and you're fulfilling that particular role there. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Is that we need to create an environment that will facilitate the outcome that we're looking for. That does not require us to be, we need to be there in the spotlight, we need to be seen, we need to be known, we need to be understood. But in the same way that you have facilitated this wonderful set of series that's here, that's allowing us to kind of come and share our perspectives on things, that's kind of how I look at it. So that's the praise. Let me come back and challenge you, because you said something.
Let's just stop there.
No. I agree with you spiritually.
I'm kidding.
You said something that I have to critique, because that book that you are kindly giving away, just reminder to people that those are available as part of the prize thing, right? In that book that I have written, I have specifically said compliance is not a process. You said compliance was use your way of pronouncing it, process, but I say compliance is not a process, it is an outcome. Now we're talking about the same thing, but I think what's really important here, we are looking to achieve a particular objective. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that what we are doing to achieve is going to help achieve that objective, right? Often we can get fixated on the processes that we have. Regulators do the same thing, right? They go through exercises, reviews, without thinking about, is this actually going to deliver? So we have to focus on the outcome that we are looking for. Now, the outcome we're looking for from a compliance perspective is the organization is compliant. It's doing the right thing. It's not doing the wrong thing. Ethics, means literally just doing the right thing as opposed to follow the rules. When we look at there's outcomes that we have there. So are the processes that we're going through achieving that objective? We often fixate on processes that we've done forever. That's the way we've always delivered this thing. The question we should be asking is that still, has it ever worked? But is it actually delivering the outcome that we're looking for? And we've got to remember that outcome. It's really easy to build the world around the processes that we have and think that those building blocks are delivering what we need. They might not be. And as we look at what technology can do, and as we look at the world becoming more sophisticated and challenging, we've got to start saying, is the traditional way that we've always done things, is that still fit for purpose? And if it's not, we need to change and we need to think about it. So the outcome is the focal point, but we need to have the processes, to your point, that deliver that particular outcome. But I have to challenge the compliance. From my perspective, compliance is an outcome, not a process.
Christine, sure. I like that. I agree with that. Sorry, Nick. I'm always doing this. I like that.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I completely agree with that. I think we should think about that. I also want to give a scapegoat to all of us. So where do we get that from? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Nick, but for me, it's because the laws tell us about the process, right? The laws give you the guidelines to what an effective compliance program is. The laws, those guidelines don't talk about outcome, right? We have to actually think about the outcome ourselves. So you're 100% right. We'll be more effective when we think about the outcome. I suspect we'll get the outcome if we speak to our business, right? But we can be forgiven for inadvertently focusing so much on the checkbox things we're supposed to do to have an effective compliance program without ever saying what an effective compliance program actually means by way of outcome. So I love that framing, and I'm glad you raised it.
And look, I think it's worth noting. Sorry, Nick. It's worth noting that there are going to be times when regulators / prosecutors are very prescriptive about how they expect to see the world. And I recognize that sometimes we are going to have to do things that we know whisper are dumb, right? That aren't actually, and that are unhelpful, because we end up fronting up processes that are silly. And we can all think of examples of those things where we have to do it because someone's told us to do it. My message to anybody who's thinking in those terms again, well, I've got all these things I need to do, is if you are being told to do something that you honestly think is silly, that is not really delivering the outcome, is either unhelpful or even counterproductive, then what I say is do the absolute bare minimum. Do what you have to do to keep the regulators happy. But it's really important that if you're going to go in front of the business and you want them to come and talk to you about problems that are having, that you are not seen, you have to own it, but you want to be a little bit careful here and to try and find as many ways as possible to engage with the business and not be fronting out. If your whole program is pointless processes that no one respects, then don't be surprised when people don't come and talk to you preemptively, right? Because they will think you are the purveyors of terrible processes. So we sometimes have to do things that we don't necessarily. So I say, give regulators what they need to see. But if it's something you don't think is a good idea, do it tick that box. Don't go anywhere beyond that. And then think about other ways that we can mitigate that. And I recognize that there is always tension there, but ideally we should only be expending effort and I mean our effort, but also the effort of the average employee, on things that are actually useful and delivering the purpose that we want. If they're not doing that, we should be saying, because that's an inefficiency, and we want to try and reduce inefficiencies as much as possible.
Yeah, and use those regulations that you just must do, which are, dumb, that you just have to tick the box on, as you said, as an opportunity to reinforce or build your new brand. If it's a stupid policy that is cast down on you from on high and everyone thinks it's stupid, well, then I think it's okay to say, yeah, this is a pretty stupid one. We absolutely have to do it. Give yourself some credibility, because you said a key word there, and that was respect. If you want to be a compliance officer that people respect and you want them to come to you, I would say then you have to show respect to them. And if you're casting, stupid policies or, based on your lack of understanding about the actual process that your new policy is affecting, that shows a level of disrespect that I think widens that chasm.
Yeah, my classic example is always, people that issue parking tickets. And we've all, I'm sure we've all had parking tickets that are, okay, we did something stupid, we shouldn't have parked there. But we've also all come across situations where we get issued parking tickets that are unreasonable, right? That just aren't in and you've got this person that's just issuing a ticket because they're told to issue the ticket and pay for it. Now, I always say, okay, fine, get that's their particular role. But if that's what you're doing as a compliance officer, all you're doing is basically implementing rules that are dumb. Then you're not in the same way that I wouldn't go for strategic advice to the person who's issuing me with a dumb parking ticket. They're not going to come to you. And I think it's always worth remembering that the sort of negative poster child for compliance is always your most stupid, petty, irritating policy. And the entirety of your program can be literally messaged by that particular thing. So we want to be minimizing things that are silly, pointless, irritating. Recognizing, of course, that employees would in many cases prefer there not to be any compliance whatsoever, but we need that basic level. But if you've got something that's particularly irritating, try not to own things that are deeply irritating or pointless, because that is what you are saying you're about, and that's not helpful at all.
Yeah, I mean, it just reinforces this brand. It reinforces the division and kind of creates we end up creating these headwinds for ourselves. And we were talking about this recently, Hemma and I, that there's always something you could have done differently. Like if you don't like whatever outcome you're experiencing, there's always something that you could have done differently, to get to that outcome. And it sometimes can be scary to pull all that responsibility on yourself and lean into that full on high agency approach. But I find it to be actually pretty freeing, because all of this stuff can change, thank God we're working in an economy now where it's knowledge work and it's human beings. And yes, human beings are complex, but to some degree, they're a known quantity because we have ourselves to reference against. So I think kind of trying to transcend out of that can create a lot of opportunities for us. We were quickly, I just want to go back to that process discussion, because I think there's a lot of corollaries that we can find from sales. Sales is another department that is named after the outcome it's meant to produce, right? Sales is meant to generate sales. Compliance is meant to generate compliance. Within the umbrella of sales, or within that department, there are all of these processes. Sales, of course, it's very objective. It's very tangible. So they might, a salesperson might be doing the right activities or, following the process that they've always followed, but they have they have a very fast metric month after month or quarter after quarter, whether or not that approach is working. We need to find a similar kind of fuel gauge or a similar type of thermometer on the wall or at least bring the eyes to our collection of processes that make up the department that's meant to generate that outcome. We need to be looking at that all the time with that scientific lens that you talked about before, Christian, to see if the outcomes are in line with what our hypothesis is or in line with what our expectation is. So we have to find some kind of a faster metric versus, just doing our quarterly report out where we're just showing a bunch of activities. If we don't have an eye on the focus, to your point, or if we don't have an eye and a focus on that outcome, to your point, well, then we're just going to keep kind of wandering and we're never going to get to the top of the mountain.
Nick, I'd love to piggyback on that one if you don't mind. I know I keep doing this, but so we've used the car analogy and the destination analogy, and I love to talk about the Waze analogy, right? So I think everybody knows what Waze is. It is a GPS navigation system. It helps millions of people every day get to their destination, no matter what it is. And they do two things. We give information they need, what the potholes might be on the road, the speed limits, that kind of thing, where you can park. We also take information in, right? So we crowdsource risk intelligence about the effectiveness of the process in terms of getting me to my destination, and we help them along the way. I love that analogy. That's where I think the future of compliance is in tech. right? Just in the same way that Waze gets me to my destination more safely, more quickly, with more peace of mind, we need to be doing that same thing for our businesses, whatever journey they might be on. And the technology is there for us to take in information and give it in the same way. I'll give you a simple example. My insurance company incentivizes me to drive more safely. And they do it by motivation by way of a discount on my premium. They also allow me to compare myself in terms of safe driving to my husband, which I love. I love telling my husband that I'm a safer driver. But it also crowdsources information from me. It takes from my phone, how I'm braking. Am I braking fast? Am I accelerating too fast? Am I going too fast? What time of day I drive? So it's crowdsourcing risk factors. So it can assess me as a risk, and it's giving me information that I need. And that is helping me get on my way faster, and it's changing my behavior. So I know we haven't got much time, and I'd love to talk about this more than anyone that wants to. But as we've been building at this, get people where they want to go, keep them moving forward and act as a guide, we need to think about using the technology to do that, right? And there's many ways in which it's already being done. The insurance is one, healthcare apps are another. They monitor your biodata and your steps and that kind of thing. But we can take in information and give information to do just what you said, Nick, like get some really good metrics on the processes that we're using and then adapt and shift and make sure it's fit for purpose. But that's not something we'll do in our own in silos in a compliance office. We're smart. Got very smart people that will help us. But really, the person that knows what the obstacles are and the opportunities are the ones that are on the journey. So I just wanted to share that because I think it's a really good way of looking to the future when it comes to AI, tech, and compliance.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, the code is working. The code is generating the behavior it's intended to generate. So they figured it out to some degree to where, that premium reduction that you're getting, I'm sure they are getting more. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Yeah.
But also I'm driving more safely because they're prompting me to think about my braking speed and my acceleration speed. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, right. So we talked a little bit about like where AI and human behavior meet. But as we sort of push deeper into this, like more technology infiltrating everything, how do we make sure that we keep the employee experience as like the central element of what we're focused on? Why don't we start with you, Christian?
So we start by recognizing that that's important. And I think very often the philosophy behind many compliance programs and the fact that your people are on this, they're watching the show, right, will tell you something that they're already thinking in terms of how do we do things differently? How can we get inspiration from Nick's guests? And I want to say that the most important thing is to be thinking in those terms. Start off by thinking that is important. Because we often rely on something I refer to as the employment contract fallacy. This always annoys lawyers slightly, right? And the employment contract fallacy is the idea that because we employ you, we can tell you what to do. Now, that is legally correct. Everybody has signed employment contracts, right, that give the employer rights over the employee. We can force them to do training. Maybe we have the dress code. We can force them to go to an office or log onto a particular system, follow particular protocols. That's legally correct. But if we rely on that, we're not thinking about, well, what does this actually feel like? Is this irritating? Is this a pleasure to do? Is this simple to do? And so even the act of thinking in those terms and going, what does this feel like for them, can start to make us, it's back to the word you said before, Nick, empathetic. And I think it's really important to be empathetic towards employees and think about what does this feel like for them? Not, idealistically what they ought to be doing, but actually the practicalities of how does it feel? How does this sit on top of their day-to-day existence? And if we start to recognize that in the same way that we do for customers, and we think about customer journeys and experiences, and we've all been customers of businesses that have treated us amazingly, and we've all been customers of businesses that have treated us appallingly. We want to make sure the compliance program feels as user-friendly as it possibly can. And inevitably, it's not always going to be user-friendly. We can't make everything super simple. But if we start to think in those terms, and we start to listen, for example, when people complain about things. I don't mean the usual sort of whinging, but I mean if lots of people are complaining about a particular process, then have a look and say, why? Why is it? Is it that they don't understand why it's there and they think it's silly? Or is it genuinely obstructive and pointless? And what can we do to try and make that better? But if we don't think in those terms, we're never even going to start to do it. So thinking is the key bit. If we want to go beyond that, we can start to analyze, we can do mystery shopping equivalents. We can use behavioral science frameworks to help us get to that point. But start point is to think in those terms and to move away from that. They must do what we say because we've employed them. They must attend the training. They must do all those things. Legally correct, but actually these are human beings we're talking about. And to your earlier point, these human beings are sentient. They will have perspectives on things. Let's try not to irritate them. Let's try and make things that work for them. And then we're more likely to get the outcomes we want.
technically my kids are legally required to listen to me, but yet they don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm very clear. Put your shoes on, go to bed, you know? Humans are going to human. Humans are going to do what they do. And they're not going to, you know, we're not coding into the brains of people yet. They're going to find ways around things that they think are stupid. They're going to find that sort of path of least resistance from their vantage point. And, you know, we don't do ourselves any favors in the situation that you just talked about, Christian. We don't do ourselves any favors when we don't have bridges built to other people in the organization, and we haven't done that pre-work to make sure that our brand is right, make sure that we're approachable, make sure that we've shown ourselves to be common sense business people. I think when we've done that and we go to somebody that we have a relationship with and we say, why do you think no one's following this? They're going to be a lot more forthcoming and a lot more transparent, so we can get down to the actual truth and adjust our policy or whatever is in question accordingly. What do you think there, Hemma, on this topic?
No, you took the words out of my mouth. Humans are going to human. At the same time, we didn't sign up to work with anything but humans, right? So,
Great point.
It cannot be we did everything we're supposed to do. Those pesky humans are getting in the way. Again, I'm going to feel like I'm a broken record. We're in service of those humans in this particular role, right? We should be. If we're not, then you're doing a different job. If you're in service of a checkbox so people can, you know, get a lower fine on a violation, fine. But really what we should be doing is being in service of the humans that we're trying to support to their destination. So I agree with you. Radical empathy, you said it yourself, compassion, curiosity are going to get you a long way. We don't have to sit there and guess, because the humans will tell you if you give a space for them to tell you what works and what doesn't. So I think be interested in that. Chris, I know you talk about, you know, what they're likely to do is where we should start, right? Not what we think we want them to do, but what are they likely to do, and then navigate around that. I think that's the beginning. Curiosity is the beginning of creativity there. And so dare we imagine a world where humans human in the ways that we think they should, right? Or they teach us something about how they need to human that's still not unethical or a violation of the law. I think we can have some fun. I mean, that's why I really have the fun. We do things like perceptions analyses. It's not just a survey or a culture survey. It's literally, hey, what do you think about compliance? And what do you think about yourself? And here's what I think about you. And here's what I think about compliance. And then you see the mismatch and you bridge the gap. That's the beginning of trust building. You know,
and there's a really interesting thing, actually, Hemma, about riffing off that, which is if we look at the biggest risk that we have is employees not doing the things that we want them to do, or doing things that we don't want them to do. So how can we analyze that problem? Well, we can start to look at it as a behavioral challenge, right? And we say to ourselves, okay, if we can get them to do those things that we want, not do the things that we don't, job done, right? And admit there's a qualitative component to this sometimes as well. Then we get that job. Now, what we should be doing is thinking not theoretically about what do we think the biggest risks facing the organization are. That's important. That's our job. But actually, we need to be looking at that gap. And what we will sometimes find is that stuff that we think is obvious, easy, blah, blah, they don't. They disagree with us. And there will be things that we think are potentially cumbersome, difficult, that they disagree. They haven't spotted it. They don't care. And so if we look at where's the biggest gap between how we perceive the world in terms of and where they perceive it, if we close that, we solve the biggest challenges we have. And often those things where the behavioral gap is there are not things that are higher up on our list of risks. There may be some process that we've put in place for a minor thing that is really irritating to the average employee that they don't want to do. So why don't we close that particular gap? So looking at the risk profile of the organization, not from a theoretical one, but from a behavioral one, starts to mean you may be running huge amounts of risk within the organization without realizing it. But equally, you may be well on top of certain other risks that you're not recognizing. And so if we can close that gap by getting their perspective, you can suddenly start to see is where is what we want them to do misaligned with what they would ideally like to do to make their lives easier.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And again, it's a game of incrementalism. It's a game of incremental improvements and pushing that, you know, kind of walking a little bit forward, one foot in front of the other. And I think sometimes a lot of the stuff we're talking about can be sort of overwhelming because you're like, oh, man, this is phenomenal. Great. How do I wave a magic wand and get behavioral science and everything throughout my entire program? That's that's difficult. And just remember that A, B, Z framework. Like if you're at A and you're trying to get to Z, you don't have to know what every single one of these 25 jumps are. I just did that in my head. You just have to get to B, and then you can just get to C. So like, what is an incremental step you can make? What is a policy that maybe is driving 80%, you know, this Pareto principle exists in everything. What is a policy that's driving 80% of the aggravation in the organization? Well, that's probably a very small proportion of your policies. And maybe you want to AI those and rework them a little bit and figure out a way to shave off some of those edges so people don't keep, getting snagged on it. All right. So we're right at the end here. Anything else from you, Hemma? Any words of wisdom? Any motivating words as we go off to finish our week?
Oh, well, just the last thing you said, like there is an A to Z and you can do A through B one step at a time, but don't do it alone. Like crowdsource that risk intelligence from the people you're trying to serve, number one.
Hundreds of people are here who will help.
Right. And it is, I don't want to oversimplify because, humans aren't simple, but it really is just basic communication between humans, right? So get back to that. Right? What works at home will work at work. Be kind, be compassionate, be curious, and you can get the seeds of trust that you need to get massive strides when it comes to compliance.
All right. So we're wrapping up. Next week, we have Matt Kelly, and we're talking about AI some more because you guys keep asking for it. So we got that topic we're going to be diving deep on. Everybody has some homework. Go on LinkedIn right now and follow Hemma. Go on LinkedIn right now and follow Christian. Also, go and like and subscribe. If you haven't listened to it yet, trust me, like it off the jump. Like and subscribe to the Human Risk Podcast. Like and subscribe to the Unless Podcast and Hemma's other award-winning podcast, The Great Women in Compliance. And if you have time, swing by the ethics experts. All right. Great episode next week. Love you all. Keep driving forward. Keep driving those changes in your organization. The work you do matters. Every single day is tough for sure. But if you can zoom out and see how far you've come, I'm sure that the impact you have already had is way bigger than you think. So keep pushing forward. Love you all. See you next Thursday. Bye-bye.